A veteran with no family collapsed in the snow. What a German shepherd did next brought the world to tears. The wind howled down the quiet street like a ghost, sweeping fresh snow into the air and erasing footprints almost as quickly as they were made. It was the kind of cold that gnawed into the bones, the kind that made every breath burn. Frank Miller, 72 years old and wrapped in an old military-issued coat, shuffled slowly along the sidewalk, one hand gripping a small paper bag from the corner grocery store. His boots worn thin, left uneven tracks behind him. His breath came out in clouds. The bag held only a loaf of bread, canned soup, and instant coffee, enough to get through the next few days alone. Frank had done this walk hundreds of times, always alone, always without a word to anyone. There was no one waiting for him at home, no one to greet him or worry if he returned late. His small cottage sat at the end of a quiet lane, its windows dark, its silence familiar. He had no children, no spouse. Most of the men he served with had either passed or moved far away. The loneliness no longer surprised him, it was just part of life. But today something felt off. His chest tightened more than usual, his vision blurred around the edges. He stopped walking and leaned against a lamppost, his hand clutching his coat. The world spun for a moment, and then, without warning, Frank collapsed into the snow. He fell hard, his body half twisting as he hit the sidewalk. The bag burst open, scattering cans across the ice. He tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came. The cold wrapped around him like a blanket. His breath slowed, his eyes fluttered shut. Snow began to cover his legs, his arms, the side of his face. No one passed by until something moved in the distance. A large figure crept across the street, low, fast, cautious. It was a German shepherd, ribs slightly visible through his fur, limping slightly on his back leg. The dog approached slowly, at first sniffing the air, then he broke into a lopsided run, sensing something was wrong. The dog reached Frank, circled him wet. He nudged the old man's face with his nose, then began pawing at the snow around his body, digging, clearing. Whining louder, he licked Frank's cheek, pressed his head against his chest, listening. Then suddenly he turned and ran a few blocks away. Dana Holloway was walking her golden retriever, trying to get one last walk in before the snow got worse. She saw the German shepherd first, charging toward her out of nowhere. Barking wildly, he stopped in front of her, eyes wide, barking again, then turning back, looking over his shoulder, urging her to follow. What on earth? She whispered. The dog barked again, more urgently this time. Something in her gut told her this was not random. She followed. A minute later she rounded the corner and saw him, an elderly man nearly covered in snow, unmoving on the ground. "Oh my God!" she gasped, dropping to her knees. She pulled out her phone, dialed 911, and held Frank's hand in hers beside her. The German shepherd sat in the snow, silent now, eyes locked on Frank's face, refusing to look away. The hospital room was dimly lit, the beeping of machines slow and steady like a second heartbeat. Frank lay in the bed, pale but breathing, wrapped in layers of warmth that had replaced the cold which nearly claimed him. The doctor said if he had been found even 10 minutes later, he might not have made it. Hypothermia, heart strain, oxygen loss, they had all worked against him, but somehow he was still here. Dana Holloway stood quietly near the doorway, speaking softly to the nurse. He would not have made it if that dog had not found me, she said. It was like he knew exactly where to go and what to do. The story spread quickly. Stray dog saves veteran, and Blizzard read the local headline. The next day news outlets began calling. A reporter came by the hospital to ask Frank for a statement, but he was still unconscious, so instead they turned their attention to the dog, a large, lean German shepherd with soulful eyes and a scar on his hind leg, now resting quietly at the County Animal Shelter. The staff at the shelter had named him Hero at least, until someone came forward with a better name. They cleaned him, fed him, treated his old injury. Still he barely responded to anyone, only pacing near the door and whining as if waiting for something or someone. 3 days later Frank opened his eyes. He was disoriented at first, blinking at the harsh lights, struggling to piece together what had happened. Then he saw Maya, the caseworker assigned to his recovery, sitting by his bedside. "You had a close call, Mr. Miller," she said gently, "but you're going to be okay. You were saved." Frank, saved? Maya smiled. "By a dog astray, they say. He found you, then ran to get help. You were unconscious in the snow." Something in Frank's expression shifted. "A dog, yes." She nodded, pulling out her phone. "Would you like to see a picture of him?" She showed him a photo, grainy, taken from the shelter's intake form. The moment Frank saw it, he gasped. His hand trembled slightly. That's Rex. I knew him," Frank whispered. 2 winters ago he used to come by my porch, skinny, limping. I fed him every day for a month. He was the only visitor I ever had. One morning he was just gone." "You think this is the same dog?" "I know it is," Frank said, tears building behind his eyes. "He remembered me the next morning." Frank insisted on leaving the hospital. For a few hours, with Maya's help, he bundled into a wheelchair and rode in silence to the local animal shelter. The staff were waiting, skeptical but curious. They rolled Frank into the kennel room. The moment Rex saw him, he froze. Then he let out a loud bark that echoed through the space. He bolted toward the gate, tail wagging so hard it thumped against the walls. The staff opened the enclosure. Slowly, unsure, Rex ran straight to Frank, burying his face in the old man's lap, whining, licking his hands, pawing at his coat. Frank reached down with shaking fingers and touched the dog's face. "It's you," he whispered. "You came back." Rex let out a soft, satisfied growl and pressed closer. He was home. Frank returned home a week later, thinner and weaker than before, but alive and no longer alone. With a doctor's note and the shelter's approval, Rex was released into Frank's official care. The moment they stepped inside the quiet little cottage at the end of Maple Lane, something shifted. What had once been a place of silence and shadows now felt warm, almost alive. The two settled quickly into a rhythm. Rex never left Frank's side. He followed him from room to room, sat by the kitchen while Frank made oatmeal, and waited by the bathroom door like a silent guardian. Every night he curled up on the rug beside the bed, and every morning he was the first face Frank saw. When he opened his eyes, he would bark just once, at precisely 9 a.m., reminding Frank to take his heart pills. Frank joked that the dog had a better memory than he did. Frank began to change. His skin took on more color. His voice grew stronger. For the first time in years, he tended to the small backyard garden he had long neglected. Rex would trot alongside as Frank leaned on his cane, checking on the tomatoes and sunflowers. In the evenings, Frank would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee while Rex lay at his feet, tail tapping gently whenever a breeze blew. The neighbors, once distant and unfamiliar, began to notice the change. They started waving from across the street, some stopping by with baked goods or warm coats for Rex. A group of kids asked if they could play with him. Frank, who had rarely spoken to anyone in years, opened his gate and said yes. It became a ritual. Every Saturday, children from the block would gather in Frank's yard, throwing tennis balls and laughing as Rex darted, still fast. Despite his limp, after each one, Frank would sit in his chair and tell stories from his time in the Marines, and for the first time in decades someone was there to listen. People began calling Rex the guardian of Maple Lane. If someone forgot to bring in a package, Rex would sit beside it until the owner came home. If a kid dropped a mitten, Rex would nudge it with his nose until someone picked it up. He seemed to know exactly what to do, and when then came the night of the fire, it was just past midnight when Rex began pacing near the front door. Frank stirred, but waved him off. Go back to sleep, boy. But Rex did not listen. He barked sharp and loud, then again more urgently. Frank struggled up and followed Rex to the window. Smoke thick and rising from the house across the street. Frank called 911 immediately, then reached for his code. Before the sirens even arrived, Rex had bolted outside and was barking like mad. Circling the neighbor's porch, lights came on, doors opened, a woman emerged carrying a toddler, coughing, eyes wide with fear. Behind her came two boys, stumbling and dazed. The entire house could have gone unnoticed in the quiet of night, but not with Rex on duty. The fire trucks came just in time. The family survived. No lives were lost the next morning as the neighborhood gathered to comfort the shaken family. Frank stood with Rex at his side. He saved them, Frank said, voice rough with emotion, just like he saved me from that day on. Rex was more than a hero to Frank. He was a hero to them all. The sun had just begun its descent behind the trees when it happened. Frank was out in the backyard, trimming the last of his rose bushes before the cold set in for good. Rex was lying a few feet away, chewing lazily on a stick, occasionally glancing at Frank as if to make sure he was still okay. Then, without warning, Frank staggered. He dropped the clippers, clutched his chest, and fell to one knee. Rex's ears perked. Instantly Frank tried to call out, but the words never formed. He crumpled onto the grass, eyes half closed, breath coming in short gasps. Rex shot up like lightning. He barked loud and sharp, then bolted toward the fence. He pawed furiously at the gate, barking again and again until a neighbor, Mr. Evans, stepped out to check the noise. "What is it, boy?" he asked. Rex didn't wait. He ran to the edge of the yard, looked back, barked, then sprinted toward Frank's body. Evans followed, and when he saw Frank lying motionless on the grass, he called 911. Without hesitation, the paramedics said it was a minor stroke, caught early. Had Rex not raised the alarm when he did, it could have been far worse. The hospital kept Frank for observation, and when he was released, the doctor delivered a sobering warning: he should no longer live entirely alone. Frank expected this to be the beginning of the end, another freedom taken away, another reminder of his age. But something unexpected happened instead. The neighbors volunteered. A small group rotated visits. Each day meals arrived, the garden got watered, kids stopped by to check on Rex. "We're just giving back," they said. "After all, you've both saved this street more than once." Soon a local news station picked up the story. They aired a segment titled "Guardian Angel in Fur," featuring clips of Rex leading a reporter around the neighborhood like a proud mayor. Frank sat in a lawn chair, bundled in a blanket, Rex calmly at his feet as he told the story of how they found each other twice. "You think you're the one who saves the dog," he said, "but sometimes it's the dog who saves you." The story touched thousands. Letters came in from across the state. A retired publisher reached out, offering to help. Frank put his memories to paper. With Ma's encouragement, Frank began to write again, something he had not done in decades. The result was The Dog Who Waited, a collection of stories from Frank's military past, his quiet years alone, and the remarkable bond he had formed with a stray who never forgot. Then came the fall harvest fair. Frank was asked to give a short speech at the closing ceremony. The crowd gathered in the town square, and Frank was wheeled onto the stage rack, sitting tall at his side, wearing a small vest that read, "Service Dog Veteran Companion Hero." Frank looked out over the audience, neighbors, children, families, and cleared His throat I've survived things most. People only read about I've seen war. I've seen death, I've seen silence that can last a lifetime, he said, voice steady. But nothing has ever saved me. Like this dog I thought I was done, I thought life was over, but Rex he didn't just pull me out of the snow, he pulled me out of the war I was still fighting inside. There was silence, then applause loud, long and many teary eyes as Frank smiled and patted Rex's head. The dog let out one soft bark and the whole town seemed to breathe as one. The years passed gently like leaves floating on a slow river. Frank and Rex became part of the fabric of the town, two souls once lost, now woven into the everyday rhythm of life on Maple Lane. Wherever one was seen, the other was not far behind. Frank's story and Rex's loyalty had touched every local. Schools began inviting them to visit, calling their talks lessons of the heart. Frank would sit in front of the children, cane resting on his knees, while Rex lay at his feet, head on his paws, eyes watchful. The kids would ask questions about war, about bravery, but most of all about love. The kind of love that never forgets. They began calling him Uncle Frank, and their drawings of him and Rex filled the halls. Stick figures of a man and a dog side by side under big blue skies. Though his hair grew whiter and his steps slower, Frank still rose with the sun each day. Rain or shine, he and Rex made their way around the small park 2 blocks from their home. Frank would walk a few paces, stop to catch his breath, and Rex would pause with him, patient as ever. They had no need to rush, they had already outrun time once. One crisp autumn morning, the leaves ablaze of gold and rust, Frank and Rex made their usual walk to the park. They reached their favorite bench beneath the old sycamore tree. Frank sat down slowly, exhaling with contentment. He looked at the tree's canopy swaying above and smiled. Rex sat beside him, then curled gently at his feet. Frank placed his hand softly on Rex's head, and then quietly, peacefully, he closed his eyes. He did not open them again. Rex didn't move. He rested his head gently on Frank's shoe and stayed there as the wind whispered through the leaves. It was late afternoon when someone found them, one still and silent, the other watching over him like he always had. The town mourned together. Shops hung flags at half-mast. Children left flowers and crayon drawings on the bench. Veterans saluted. And Rex, he stayed close, sleeping by the front door of the home they had shared, waiting for footsteps he knew would never come again. But Frank had made arrangements. Rex was taken in by Maya, who had helped them from the start. He lived the rest of his days surrounded by familiar voices and kind hands, still visiting the park, still resting by that bench. Months later, a bronze statue was unveiled beneath the sycamore. It showed an old man seated, one hand gently resting on the head of a German shepherd. At his side, at the base, an inscription read, "For every soul that was forgotten, there's always one who remembers." And so their story lived on, not in books, not just in news clips or photographs, but in the hearts of everyone who ever believed in second chances, in quiet love, and in the power of a loyal dog to bring a man back from the cold. If this story of Frank and Rex touched your heart, you're not alone. Their bond reminds us all that even in life's coldest moments, love, loyalty, and the quiet companionship of a dog can bring someone back from the edge. At Amazing Paws Stories, we bring you powerful real-life tales like this. Stories that heal, inspire, and remind us of the extraordinary ways animals change lives. Subscribe to Amazing Paws Stories today and become part of a growing family that believes in second chances, silent heroes, and the beautiful truth that sometimes it's the one you saved who ends up saving you. Thank you for watching, and remember, every paw print tells a story.